Creativity is Not Magic with Randy Capp. This is Ramon Rocha greeting you on behalf of MAI. It's a beautiful spring day. The highest temperature is 69 degrees Fahrenheit here in Chicago. Welcome. In this webinar, we will answer the following questions. What is creativity, and do I possess it? What is the creative process, and how can I participate? What are my barriers to creativity, and how can I break them? Feel free to interact with our presenter using the chat window on your screen. Thank you for your greetings, Barbara and Momir. We are so privileged to have Randolph Capp, or Randy, as our presenter today. Randy is the Design and Communications Consultant for the Bible Society of Egypt. He has more than 35 years of experience in designing Christian literature in multiple languages for international distribution. Randy has been generous in sharing his expertise not only throughout the UBS Global Fellowship groups, but with MAI as well. He was a speaker at Lit World conferences in the past. So we are so privileged to have Randy with us. Randy, thank you for making yourself available to serve as MAI webinar speaker today. We are all looking forward to hearing.
It is my great
Go ahead, Randy, and start your presentation.
Great. Well, I want to welcome everyone, and I've been looking forward to this time together. I hope that it will be helpful to you, that even spiritually encouraging. I also hope that we can have some interaction together, and I'm going to, in the course of this, ask a few questions, and I'm hoping to get some feedback from you. Now, if you have questions, please write them out in the chat box, and we'll either answer them during the session. If I feel like I need to stop and just answer a question that comes up, that's great. Otherwise, we'll go back and cover them when we get to the end. And so I am just going to say a word of prayer, and then we're going to start. Living God, we thank you for our time together. We pray for your guidance, that that we would bring glory to your great name through our time together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
So let's begin with a simple logic problem. Now, you can ask any question you want to solve this. Here's a series of numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and I want you to get your answers on this. Can you figure out what is the pattern behind these numbers? And if you had to say which number comes next in the sequence, what number would that be? Could everyone type in their answer? So we've got 14. Man, there's a lot of 14s. Maybe this was too easy. Well, I've done this workshop before, and nearly everyone says 14. And here's the reason why. When we face a problem, we compare it with problems that we have had been faced in the past, and then we choose an answer based on what has worked before in the past. And when we found that solution, we stop looking because we know that we have solved the problem. And so we look at that sequence of numbers and immediately we think 14, because after all, that each number is 2 numbers higher than the number that went before it. Do you remember I said at the very beginning, you can ask any question you want to solve this problem? In general, few people ask questions because the answer is so obvious. But is it really so obvious? The pattern here is not 2 digits higher, but every number is greater than the number before it. Therefore, 13 can be a correct number. 241 could be a correct number. Any number higher, larger than the number 12. But few people get that answer because most people don't ask the right questions. What marks creative people is that they have learned to do this. They have learned to keep asking questions after other people have stopped. I love this from Albert Einstein. When he was asked the difference between him and other people, he said that the average person, when faced with the problem of trying to find a needle in a haystack, would stop when he or she located the needle. But Einstein said that he would tear through the entire haystack to find all the needles that were there. Creative people have learned how to look at problems in a different way. They have learned how to analyze and see things that others don't see. In his outstanding book, which I would highly recommend to you, author Michael McAlco wrote this: if we always think like we've always thought, we'll always get what we've always got. If we were together in a workshop, we would be saying this over and over again until it was burned into our brains. If we always think like we've always thought, we'll always get what we've always got. So we need to learn new ways of thinking to go beyond what everyone else is doing, and so that we can arrive at new ideas, creative directions that nobody has ever come across before. So let's get started today by talking about what human creativity is not. Let's take a step right now and can we, Ramon, can we solve these audio problems?
I'm not sure if anyone else other than Eva is having problems with audio. So I think Eva, maybe Eva's internet connection is not okay.
Okay, she can hear. Okay, good.
Okay.
So let's talk about what human creativity is not, and then look at what it is. Most people have this kind of idea in the back of their minds that creativity is a gift from God that the specially chosen people have, but then all the ordinary, unblessed people don't have. and they see creativity as a kind of magic. And they say, oh, I wish I was more creative, or, oh, I wish I was more like this person or that person. But human creativity is not magic. Creativity is a way of thinking. And as a way of thinking, it can be learned, it can be developed. And I could make a really strong case that creativity is part of being made in the image of our creative God, which means that all of us have it. But there are two problems here. And these problems are this. This creativity is not expressed in a lot of people because, number one, we don't understand how the creative process works. And number two, many suffer from barriers that put the creative fires out. So creativity is not magic. It's not a special gift from God. It's not something that the blessed people have, unblessed people never got. It's something that we all have as being made in the image of God. But it needs to be understood. So then let's move on to what human creativity actually is. When God creates things, He fashions them out of nothing. When He created the universe, He just spoke and it came into existence. In addition, when God creates, He creates something that is completely new. For example, when He created the hippopotamus, He didn't have a picture to look at, or He didn't have to make sketches. He didn't have a model and said, well, I'll make it like this, but I'll change something. He just made something totally new and completely unique. Man, on the other hand, when man creates, he doesn't create anything out of nothing, nor can man create anything totally new. Instead, our creativity is a process of combining, of putting things together. Human creativity is the process of taking different things, ideas, influences, technologies, anything and everything, and putting them together in a new and unique combination. I think we see this most clearly in art history. Now, I didn't put this picture on the slide because art history is boring, although it could be with the wrong teacher. But I remember when I went to design school, I took 3 art history courses. And lectures were given in a darkened room. And the images were projected on the screens using Kodak carousel projectors. Now I realize that a number of you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say a Kodak carousel projector. It probably says something about your generation. I once remember asking my daughter if she had ever used a manual typewriter. And she said, she thought about it, she said, well, I saw one once. Anyway, it used Kodak carousel projectors, and little pieces of film and slides came in and they were projected out on the screens that were in this darkened room. This was a class that you did not want to take after lunch because of the temptation to fall asleep. And as the instructor would lecture about one artist after another, think with me of what his lectures would consist of. he would talk about how that particular artist was influenced by other artists that came before him or were around him. He'd talk about how that artist incorporated philosophies and ideas of the day that were popular at that time. He'd also talk about how that artist adapted technological advances, such as new ways to make paint and other things like that. And all of these influences and ideas and technologies were combined with the artist's ability to draw, paint, or sculpt. Was this artist creative? Absolutely. But the creativity was by combining everything together in a new and unique way. Because of this, there are two things that we need to do to increase our capacity for new combinations. First, we need to expand the storeroom of ideas and influences that we have from which to draw upon. And then secondly, we need to build a reliable storage system that will keep this information that we have gathered in an organized way. So let's look at how we expand our storeroom of ideas and influences. Creative people have an infectious curiosity about everything. They have this desire to know new things. I read a wide variety of books and magazines. Now, they're not print books anymore. They're all ebooks. It's the wonder of Kindle, that you can access any book anywhere in the world. It's wonderful after all those years of living overseas and not being able to get them. I read a wide variety of books and magazines on all kinds of subjects, and these all add to my inventory in my mental storeroom. And years from now, I may take something that I read this week and either consciously or subconsciously combine it with something that I'm exposed to, several years from now, into something that's a truly creative idea. But it's not only books and magazines, it is literally anything and everything that we encounter. For example, we could see an interesting lettering style on a street sign. We could hear a random quote about something. We could see a particularly interesting infographic. We could read something with a different point of view. Everything and anything increases our range of ideas and influences from which we can draw these combinations. One of the most creative people who ever lived was Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci had an insatiable thirst for knowledge, and he made volumes of notes. And if you could look at the sketches and notes that Da Vinci made, you would find they deal with all kinds of subjects. It's absolutely astonishing. You'd find sketches that deal with botany, geology, zoology, military engineering, animal and human anatomy. You'd find notes on a wide range of physical sciences, such as mechanics, perspective, light, optics. Da Vinci was curious about everything, and he built this massive storeroom that he could draw upon. Creative people are hungry for knowledge and are curious about everything. And I hope that describes you. If you're in an organization and you are responsible for interviewing prospective employees, I think it's a great idea to ask them about their range of outside interests. Ask them about what they like to read. Are they interested in history, the sciences, social issues, philosophy? Can they carry on intelligent conversations about a wide variety of subjects? Do they show a natural curiosity? And this will help you know what kind of mental storeroom they can draw upon as they solve problems and come across things and work on things for your organization. So the first thing is to expand that storeroom, and the second thing is absolutely critical, and that is to build a reliable storage system to organize this information so that we can later go back, find it, and retrieve it. Now, in the old days, and the older I get, the more the old days come, this was a challenge. Today, the internet has changed absolutely everything. And there is a software program that comes in both free and premium versions that I use every single day. And I highly recommend it to you no matter what kind of work you do. And that program is called Evernote. I wonder if you are using Evernote on a regular basis, could you just type that in the chat box? Because I'd be curious to know how many people are using Evernote regularly. Dan says every day. B. Johnson, I use it. Janet, Charlie, I don't use it yet. Well, or George, sorry, I don't use it yet. George, I hope I can persuade you. Often, good. So we've got a variety of people that are using it, sometimes use it, haven't used it and don't use it anymore, and so on. Evernote is on my phone, my tablet, my computers at work, at home, so it is always available. And you think of Evernote as an electronic filing cabinet or a storage facility. Plus, it has a web clipping extension that works with various internet browsers, so you can right-click on anything and store it for later use. Let me show you how it works and how I use Evernote on a daily basis. I'm switching over to a screenshot of a book I'm working on now on how we got the Bible, and there is a page spread there which is called the Old Testament Story. And you'll see that it divides the Old Testament up into different sections, and each section has a little spot illustration at the top of it, and I want to focus on this spot illustration right here, which is David and Goliath. If I switch over to a portion of my Evernote workspace, you'll find over here that I've listed out some notebooks, and this is only a portion of the screen. You'll notice the top one is inbox, and then to be read. I keep in Evernote my journal, I keep my personal hymn book, my devotional things. Then you'll see current projects for the Bible Society of Egypt, projects other, and so and so. I use a system called Getting Things Done by the late David Allen, which I highly recommend to you. If any of you want more information about that, maybe we can work that out at the end. And this in answer to a question, this is the premium version, of Evernote. And so I wanted to show you, first of all, a portion of my Evernote workspace and how the folders are set up. And then I want to go down, and I've expanded out projects for the Bible Society of Egypt, and you can see that I have a separate note for every project that I am working on. And as I come across things that I think could be useful resources in one of these projects, whether it is I'm accessing it from my phone or from my tablet, work, or the office, I dump it into these folders on Evernote. Now, what I really want you to pay attention to here is 4A, Current Project, which is the most amazing book in the world. And so I'm going to go to the next portion of the screen, and I want you to see that here I have expanded out my current project, and you can actually see that I've taken and divided it into page numbers and what the subject is, and that becomes a separate notebook. And when I find things that relate to that particular subject, I put it specifically into that notebook. And so when we put the screen back out, you'll see that right here we're in the notebook called Old Testament Story. There's a whole bunch of notes here that would relate to information of things when I'd be writing the text. Or there's one here that I put in there called David Illustrations. And you can see a portion of those illustrations over here on this panel. And here is just a whole series of images from the internet of different artists on how they have depicted David and Goliath in this famous story from the Bible. And so as I would gather all those pictures, and when I then came to sketch out this particular spot, this particular tiny little illustration, I'd look through them and say, you know, I like that shield, or I like that way he's got something, his feet are covered, or I like that spear, and so on. And then I would use that as the basis to create the basic sketch for the illustration. Then I'd scan the sketch into Adobe Illustrator, and you can see here all the vectors that go into making up this illustration. And when I switch over to the preview mode of Adobe Illustrator, you can see that's the final little spot illustration that's just going to be really tiny on the page. We haven't quite decided whether we're going to keep these as silhouettes or I'm going to go back in and in colors into the various figures, but it gives you the idea. And then we go back to the page and you can see how it fits on the page. So that's how I use Evernote. The whole purpose here is to be in continuous collection mode so that a wide range of influences and ideas can be collected and organized so that I can access them whenever I need them. Now, over the years, I've tried a lot of different options, such as Microsoft OneNote, but I have found Evernote to be the best, probably because it better matches the way my brain works. The whole point of this, and this is to build a reliable storage system. So let's recap of where we've come so far. To increase our capacity for new patients, we have to expand the storeroom of ideas and influences upon which to draw from, and we need to build a reliable storage system so that we can keep that information in an organized way so that we can go back and retrieve it when we need it. But all this leads to another question. How do these creative combinations actually take place? The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said this: "Every walking animal is driven to its purpose with a stick. This includes human beings. We need sticks that drive us into deeper thinking. And these sticks are thinking techniques that lead us to the place where creative combinations are developed. One author I really like called these thinking techniques a whack on the side of the head. For example, if you look at this grid, you'll see a series of parallel lines, both horizontal and vertical. Now, try to imagine that these lines are not straight. In fact, try to imagine that these lines are all floating on a surface of water and constantly moving. It's actually very difficult to do this. We have to really use our imagination. We need to add something to this to make that happen. So look what happens when I add some color. Now, I'm hoping this shows over the presentation software. Adding color to this makes all the lines begin to move. Now try to imagine this grid still being there and none of these shapes are actually moving. They just appear to us to be moving. In fact, you're probably having trouble believing that these lines are actually still parallel, but they are. Let me add the grid back on top of this so you can see, and go back and forth, so you can see that they actually never really moved. They just appeared to us. That only thing that I changed in this was that I added a little color to that grid. Applying creative thinking techniques to the problems we face is like adding color to this grid. They push us to see things in a completely different way. Here's another example. Here's a picture of a rabbit. Now, there's actually another picture in this scene, but you don't see it, and you can see it if I tell you to kind of turn your head sideways and look at it sideways. You'll actually see that it's also the picture of a duck. The picture itself doesn't change, just our angle of view. Applying creative thinking techniques to our problem can help us see things in a new angle, in a new way. And what we need are questions that hit us on the head and cause us to look off in different directions. We're going to get to that, but first there's some questions we need to ask. The first questions, the three questions are, do I have the information I need? Am I allowing enough time? And am I willing to fail? First question, do I have the information I need? Creative thinking techniques require a sufficient body of knowledge, of mastery of the subject matter or the stuff that we need so that we can play with and work in the creative process. And often, we don't think creatively because basically we haven't done our homework, or we haven't spent the time to master a variety of skills. We don't do enough study. We don't do enough gathering information on our own. If you think back of the illustration on David and Goliath, what lies behind that? Well, there's Bible knowledge, there's the ability to draw, there's a mastery of Adobe Illustrator, there's an understanding of the creative process, there's a mastery of Adobe InDesign, and so on. This is actually why I spend my lunch hours watching video tutorials on various techniques or software that I'm either currently using or want to learn for the future. For every creative challenge, there's a body of information for a specific problem that we must know, and this is really important: a lack of information always limits creative solutions. So the first question is, do I have the information I need? The second question is, have I allowed enough time? As we all know, deadlines are a necessity in publishing, but they can be hindrances to creativity if they are too tight. The reason for this is that creativity always involves a great deal of experimentation. And that is why designers make sketches. That's why scientists carry out experiments. I can't tell you how many times it's happened, and I know a lot of you can relate to me on this, is that I have written something or I've designed something one day and been a bit too close to it and thought it was really good, and then went home, came back the next day and saw it with fresh eyes and realized how poor it actually was. We need time apart from what we're working on so that we can come back to it with fresh eyes. Creative ideas often occur in the subconscious mind after a period of incubation. Long after we've stopped thinking about it, our subconscious minds are still working on it. And the actual process of combining or the idea coming is often a mystery. But this is where someone wakes up in the middle of the night with a new idea, or someone writes something down on a napkin in a restaurant, and so on. But it all takes time and deadlines to take this into account. The third question is, am I willing to fail? Because one of the most common barriers to creativity is not being willing to be a failure. A creative person has to be willing to look stupid and be criticized. Creative people cannot have a fear of failure. In fact, they have to know that they're going to fail over and over again. I hope you didn't hear that noise. That's somebody in my office sending me a note. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. I'm from the Chicago area, and of course, for all of us from that area, Michael Jordan is a regional hero, if not a national, a famous basketball player. And I love this quote from Michael Jordan. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Some of us are afraid to be criticized. We fear someone looking at us and saying, wow, is that a stupid idea? We carry around emotional scars from our childhood, perhaps something that our parents said to us or a teacher said to us, and the hurt is buried so deep that we may not even be aware of it. But rather than risk criticism, we choose not to say anything at all. I can remember speaking at a Lit World long ago in the 1990s, and I gave everyone a problem to solve and then asked them to share their solutions. And I waited for just the right person, because if you choose the wrong person, it could be a major problem. Finally, the right person gave their solution, and I looked at that person with a straight face, and I said, that is one of the stupidest ideas I've heard in a long time, and with a straight face turned around and walked away. The room fell absolutely silent. And after a few moments, I asked everyone, how did you feel when I criticized that person? Did any of you have a possible solution to share, but you decided against sharing it because you might be criticized as well? Now, there's two sides to this. On one hand, management needs to develop a way to reject inappropriate or poor solutions, while at the same time not crushing the creative spirit of employees. And this can be a difficult balance. But on the other side, a creative person must have a very secure sense of self-worth. Why? Because creative solutions involve risk. And people without a sense of inner security, they're just not going to take these risks. So one of the deepest hindrances to creativity is the fear of being criticized. And there are many people who live uncreative adult lives because of the criticism they received as children and never got over it. But listen, of all the people on earth, Bible-believing Christians should be more willing to accept criticism and failure than anyone else. Why? Because that's what we are. We're failures. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So we have these three important questions that need to be answered. And then we can move on to thinking techniques that hit us in the head, lead us into new viewpoints, and uncover new creative ideas that we've not thought of before. And there are many ways of doing this to make these creative combinations. But the way I work is usually through mind mapping. I usually start by writing the big idea that I want to communicate down in the middle of a piece of A3 size paper. And then I begin with words. I never begin sketches. This helps lead to creative combinations I wouldn't have seen otherwise. Let me give you an example of how this works. I usually throw my sketches and my mind maps and everything away when I finish with a project. So I didn't have a lot to choose from, but I did have this one. To design a cover for a book called, which I referred to in The Last Lit World, Words That Changed the World, I wrote the title in the center of a paper, and then I began to list synonyms and related concepts next to each word. At some point early in process, two things kind of connected in my mind. The words convert, or from this to that, which comes from the word changed, and a globe or a map of the world. And that sparked an idea. And this led to a very simple thumbnail here, which shows the transition from darkness to light. And so you can see that the idea is changing from dark to light, dark, reverse, light, so on. And that ended up in this book cover, which now we're really happy. This book is now in 9 different languages. And we just had Pope Francis come and visit Egypt, and in his closing meeting in a football stadium here in town, we passed out 30,000 copies of this book that to everyone who came. Now, sometimes I can fill in several A3 sheets with word lists, and I haven't even begun the process of doing sketches. You can do mind maps about anything. In fact, here's a mind map about mind mapping. Let me give you another example. I don't have the mind map because I'm sure I threw it away, but I still have a page of sketches. These were the sketches done for a logo for a Bible Society conference. And this was based on a whole series of a mind map with lists of words. And when I came across combinations in those terms that I thought could work, then I went into the sketching process. And usually when I'm doing this, then I circle ideas that I think have potential. So you can see that this one right here is circled. And then you can see the final logo for the conference, which was engaging audiences, transforming lives. This is this whole thing didn't start with sketches, it started with word lists. And trying to list out combinations of words to come up with a creative combination to work from. Now, mind mapping can be done individually, or it can be done in groups. And Ramon, I am conscious of the time, because I know you are. For groups, I recommend a more structured approach to traditional mind mapping, which is called the lotus blossom. This is not original with me, but I can't remember where I found it. If I could, I would certainly give them credit. And this diagram was included in the handout, which you should have received. And here's how it works. You begin by writing your central problem in the middle of this grid. And this might be the title of a book. It might be any problem that you want to solve. And then you take and expand that out, and in the circles around the center square, you write down important themes or components or synonyms or something that draws out from that central theme. And then, after that, you copy those 8 things into the 8 outside squares, so they become the center of their own little nest of ideas. And then from that, you take that particular idea, and then you can fill out ideas or synonyms or related terms that come from that. Now, the genius of this approach of the lotus blossom is that it can work with groups, where you start with that blank diagram that's also included on the PDF with one sheet on the wall, and you fill that out. And then you expand it by putting new sheets up, going out farther and farther, as far as you want to go, so that you've used this across a whole wall, and you have increased your range of ideas. And in the process of that, you can see combinations between, something you wrote here and something you wrote there. And if we had the time, I would give you an example of how that works. But you can see how this could work as a group in expanding creative possibilities and combinations for an idea. Now, mind mapping can't just be done in isolation. It has to be done in combination with questions that hit us on the side of the head and take us off into new directions. Creativity and humor are related. When we find, think about this. Why do we find something funny? When someone tells a joke, why do we laugh at it? Why does it strike us that as something is humorous? It's usually because our minds are going in a certain direction, and then something happens in that joke that puts us off in a different direction that is totally unexpected, and so we laugh. Creativity is the same way, and so often when you see a truly creative idea, we react in the same way that we would react when we hear a good joke. We laugh. I'll give you an example of a cartoon. This is a guy named Gary Larson, who is one of my all-time favorite cartoonists, and I realize that humor is culturally bound and even personally bound, but I find this cartoon really funny because you would not expect to find a farmer coming and seeing 2 of his cows doing what he and his fellow farmers do to them, dividing him up and seeing which parts of beef would be the tastiest to eat. We need a series of questions that hit us on the side of the head and move us off into a different direction. And author Michael McCalco, again, in his book, Thinker Toys, has given a whole list of questions that do exactly that, and that list was included in the PDF that you should have received of questions that hit us on the head by Michael McCalco. And I suggest that you use these questions to look at your idea you need to solve that will help you, hit you on the side of the head and help you off in a direction that you would not have taken any other way. So we need to wrap this up because we need to leave some time for questions. So let's summarize. Because creativity is a combining process. We can expand the ideas and influences to which we are exposed and build a reliable storage system for later retrieval. But there are 3 questions that we need to ask. Do I have sufficient information? And have I allowed enough time? And am I willing to fail? And the last things, mind mapping can be combined with questions that change our perspective and hit us on the head. So it's been great to share this briefly with you. I think if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And now I see who B. Johnson is. So great, glad you could be with us, Barb. It's great to connect with you. And say hi to Brad, please. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Randy. Open to entertain questions from the floor. Cyber floor, that is.
Ava, you are very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, that's a good question. Why do you throw away your marks? What I really should do is scan them all in and store them in Evernote. That's something I've just never got around to because I have a feeling that one day my kids and grandkids might want to see them, but maybe not. Barb has asked a question, how to combine the use of Evernote with mind mapping. Evernote is a storeroom for influences and ideas. When I start mind mapping, I will go back into my Evernote file and review things that I have placed in there, and then they will sit in my subconscious mind or my conscious mind and emerge as I start mind mapping and working out different ideas. Charlie, what do you do when you get a creative block and you need to push yourself due to deadlines? How to break free from that? Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I do get creative blocks. I find writing much more difficult than designing just because I'm not a writer, and I don't do it all the time. But, you know, sometimes you got to push through. Sometimes you need to get up and just go for a walk. What I've done in the past from time to time, and this was kind of before the internet and Evernote and you know, modern technologies, is I would take my idea that I was working on and I would go into a grocery store or a department store or a hardware store, as crazy as this sounds, and I would walk through and look at different things in the aisle, and I would ask myself, how does that relate to the idea I'm working on? And you can't, I mean, it's astonishing how the mind works, but I could be working on some kind of book cover, and it's a particular shape of a hammer in a hardware store that leads me off in a new direction. I have done that before. It's been a while, but it's just too convenient to do Google searches now. But I have found that that's another way to break free of a creative block. Dan, I appreciate you putting this webinar together for us. Dan, it is always my greatest pleasure. And thank you, and thanks to Ramon and John and the whole MAI staff for doing this.
Thank you so much, Randy. We're so blessed to listen to your presentation. By the way, the cover, Creativity is Not Magic, the first slide is really very attractive, and I don't know, if people here at the office will say, wow, wonderful first slide. And, yeah, I appreciate
well,
your creativity.
You can't have a workshop on creativity without having some creativity in it. Now, I have placed a title of a book there. If you have not read this book, I would highly recommend it. Those of you who are still here, if you've read Getting Things Done, could you just say, type yes in the chat box? Getting Things Done is an excellent book. So he outlines a system for organizing your knowledge. Evernote is a great way, a great tool for that. And so I would recommend getting things done and going through the system by David Allen.
Randy, before we let you go, tell us more about the book you're writing.
Well, this is a book that is being done for the Bible Societies. I'm doing it, first of all for the Bible Society of Egypt, but it is with all the Bible Societies of the 146 Bible Societies we have around the world. And one of the common criticisms that we have in this part of the world, in our particular context, is people say that the Bible has been corrupted. So we want a book that's kind of aimed at a 12, 13-year-old range that will show that can't be so. And so the working title is The Most Amazing Book in the World. Of course, it's going to have a totally different Arabic title. But I'm working on I'm working through it page by page, writing and designing, and it's actually very freeing. You write something, and then you design something, and then in the process of designing it or illustrating it, you think, oh, I need to go back and mention that. So you can go back and forth. And it's been a great experience. And our plan is this. It's 48 pages. And in the first 40 pages, we are telling the story of how we got the Bible in general. And then the last 8 pages is a section of the book called Our Story. And in the case of the Bible Society of Egypt, we're going to tell the story of how we got the Arabic Bible. And so our plan is, when the whole thing is done, we'll create a website for this book that will be specific, private to Bible societies. And it's password accessible. And if they want to do the book, they can access it, download all the artwork royalty-free, do their own language edition, and then in the last 8 pages, they can tell their story. So, for example, the Bible Society of the Philippines could tell the story of how we got the Tagalog Bible. The Bible Society of France could be how we got the French Bible. Germany, how we got the German Bible, and so on. So our hope is that a book that's prepared locally will then have global use throughout Bible Society Fellowship.
We're looking forward to that book, Randy. I heard.
Yeah. So are my colleagues in the Bible Society.
When is your deadline? Amir is asking.
Yeah, I can see that. I wish you hadn't asked that question, but I do need to answer. I'm trying to get this finished by January. It's a struggle, I can tell you. But this is a more complex, when it comes to reading. I've written and designed things before, but this is at a different level of complexity. And I can tell you that putting the story of how we got the canon of Scripture into 2 pages for a 12 to 13-year-old level is a real challenge.
Well, we wish you and we pray that the Lord will really give you wisdom and creativity as you finish your book, Randy, and we look forward to hearing more and seeing the final copy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to getting done too. Charlie's asked an interesting question. What is your favorite art medium to work in besides computing? Actually, I try to have a painting going on, and I mean by painting, I mean with hand and brush and all that, at any one time. So you can see, maybe you can see this. This is at my desk here. Here is a pencil that's going to become a watercolor that we found and blew up this picture of my wife when she was a little girl swinging in a swing set. So it's only black and white picture, but I'm going to turn that into a watercolor. And in the other room, I have a large pastel that I'm working on. So it is nice to get my hands wet or get my hands dirty with pastel in fine art. Thank you for asking.
Type in your email
I'm
address.
Going to type. Sure. There you go. There's my email address. Feel free to write. Gordon has asked, is a design education necessary for graphics? No, I don't think so if you're a self-motivated, but the problem is that a lot of people, and I've seen this over and over again, think they get a little bit of knowledge in Adobe InDesign and they get some knowledge of Adobe Illustrator, or the big one, I know Photoshop, and therefore I'm a graphic designer. This is just simply not true. There's a whole body of information that has to be mastered in design principles, in typography, in print technology. I went to school 5 years for this, and that was before the days of computers. And believe me, there were great designers before the desktop, before computers. And what I like to say is that computers do not make better designers. Computers help you do bad design faster. So you can be a designer without getting a design education, but I would suggest looking at the whole area of design and seeing all the things that are involved in it, and then starting on a whole program of comprehensive self-education to get the wide range of knowledge that's needed in that particular profession.
Thank you so much, Randy. We need to wrap up. If you have more questions, please email Randy and ask your questions directly to him. It's been a wonderful webinar. Randy, thank you for your generous sharing of your time and expertise. This has really been a helpful
great joy
session, and we appreciate you for joining us and partnering with us at MAI. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone.
Very much for everyone for joining us in today's webinar. We hope that you've learned a lot, and we become more intentional in our desire to be more creative. And please share this webinar. This will be we will send you the link to this webinar and share it with your colleagues. So thank you, Randy. Our next free webinar will be on June 13th, next month, with Mark Carpenter. the president and chairman of the board of Editora Mundo Cristão in Brazil. Top trends in Christian publishing. This may not be the final title for this, but we would like to share new developments in publishing that Christian publishers around the world can use or be ready to use in the near future. So we hope that you will join us again next month or tell your colleagues about this webinar for next month. And of course, we'd like to invite you to save the date for LitWorld 2018. LitWorld is coming. Some of you have attended LitWorld in the past, but this is a global conference of Christian literature workers. Writers, editors, publishers, designers are welcome to join and be inspired, learn from each other, encourage one another in the work of using the written word to help transform lives. This is October 28th to November 2 in Singapore. Bernice Lee and her team are ready to go and help and are preparing to make the next LitWorld another event. So thank you. Thank you for everyone. Leah, thank you, Dan, Eva. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, thank you, Randy, for being our speaker.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Good night or good day to everyone. God bless you. Bye for now.
God bless you too. Bye-bye.